morning, everyone. So our panel today is on brand marketing and big data in an always-on and fragmented consumer world. Just a couple of key points on why we think this is a really important topic for marketers today. First off is that the demographic stereotyping the marketers used to use to reach their target consumers doesn't work in a postmodern world that we have today. It used to be in 1960 that if you were a manufacturer of groceries and you wanted to reach your consumer, all you had to do was target women 25 to 54. And now 40% of men are doing the grocery shopping. So clearly you have to move on to more sophisticated methods of finding your consumers. The second thing is that there's just so much data that it's really changed the shape of the marketing funnel. In the old times, data was created at a slow pace. 90% of all the data in the world today was created in the last 2 years, which the impact of that has really changed the shape of the marketing funnel. Consumers now start researching, and as they start researching, they don't narrow their choices. They actually increase their set of choices before they further narrow them down, something that we've called the battle of the bulge in the shape of the marketing funnel. And so for that reason, it's really important to figure out how to navigate through all of the big data. And the third thing is fragmentation. As everybody knows, consumers are now consuming content on every kind of possible device. In the video world where I live at Tremor Video, half of the hours that consumers spend watching video is not on the big screen in the living room. It's on the mobile phone, the tablet, or through connected TV. And so for those three reasons, it's really important for marketers who want to connect with their consumers to figure out how to navigate through big data and fragmentation. We have an incredible panel here today to talk about that, and we're going to take the next couple of minutes for each of them to introduce themselves.
Hello to those who can't see me on the other side of the room. I'm Scott Cooper. I am the founder of a company called ShopAdvisor, just outside of Boston, in Concord. We are both a consumer service, so ShopAdvisor.com for those of you with a keyboard in front of you. It's a consumer service that tracks products you may want to purchase in the future. And then we've taken that service, we've grown that service pretty quickly. Company's about 2 years old. We just passed 15 million users. And we've now taken that basic idea, keep track of something you want to buy in the future, and attached it to advertisements as a means of enhancing the ad.
Thanks, Scott. Hey everybody, I'm Brian Shin from a company called Visible Measures. Some of my colleagues were kind enough to join as well in the audience. We're a new kind of video analytics and advertising company, and excited to talk about brand marketing and big data, because when you think about consumer behavior, it really is all about consumers driving and dictating media consumption. And so as a marketer, it's really challenging now for you to be able to reach your consumer in the way that they're used to, which is primarily through broadcast television and big media spend focused on broadcast. So we're really excited about that shift, and I think that's one of the things we'll talk about today.
Morning, everyone. Adam Kasper from Havas Media. I'm the Chief Media Officer. You may know us as MPG and Media Contacts. We merged the companies and completely rebranded at the beginning of this year with the new name of Havas Media, so totally integrated agency now, no longer working in kind of traditional and digital media silos. Our big clients include Fidelity Investments, Volvo, Danone, Panasonic, LVMH, Choice Hotels, et cetera. So we work with a lot of big brands and a lot of very investment-driven brands who rely on us to analyze and optimize their spending across all channels, and obviously data being a huge part of what we do in that area.
Hi, I'm Jason Krebs. I am head of sales for Maker Studios. Maker is a content company. We have around 60,000 content creators, which produces roughly 5 billion views a month on YouTube. We have that set up via category, so we are becoming more like what people would think of a traditional media company, focusing on content creation and comedy and music and how-to and cooking and mom's content, and checking off all the verticals for our consumers, but also certainly so folks like Adam know where to put their advertising dollars, both when it comes to media spend as well as content creation.
Great. Well, starting off, how do each of you use big data in your roles?
I got the mic. I mean, data is this, I mean, you call it big data, you call it data, you can call it analytics. It is the center of what we do as an agency. It's really what we see as one of our main differentiating points. It really fuels everything that goes on, obviously on the digital side, but also on the traditional media side as well. We've invested very heavily in a really advanced analytics practice. We have a huge group of analysts. The ratio in our company of media planner, or someone in a role of planning and buying media, to analyst is about 3 to 1. So there's really a huge organization of analytics, over 60 people who are purely dedicated to analyzing data, working with our media teams to optimize campaigns, and working with clients to make sense of where their investment's going and what's working, and how to make it work better.
Hey, you gotta check out Adam's socks. I don't know if you guys can see these. Can you see these socks over here? They're amazing. How many colors are in those? Those are like my socks are just plain black. So and my legs also aren't as nice. I'm like, was I thinking that aloud, or did I say that? Sorry about that. But so Visible Measures fundamentally is a data and analytics company. That's essentially all that we do. The reason for that is because I alluded to earlier that, I mean, how many of you guys like watch something on a DVR? Or like, do you ever DVR anything like Breaking Bad or anything? Okay, so a couple people. I'm surprised. I think everybody uses their DVR, right? And then how many times do you watch a video sent to you from a friend, like an email? You watch the TV show on Hulu. Like, the consumer behavior patterns are so different now. And if you're a marketer, and Adam can attest to this, that marketers really think differently now about how to reach those consumers and how to follow consumer behavior as opposed to trying to dictate consumer behavior. And I think that's a huge thing. So in order to do that, because the consumer behavior is so different now, essentially the data is the signal for how you can draw the insights and then how you can take action as a marketer. So for us, we started as an analytics company gathering the biggest data set in video. We track essentially how users watch video, how users share video. The importance of this is that then a marketer can then utilize this information essentially to either improve their video content, target their audiences better, or they can create campaigns that actually get shared and passed along. And that allows a marketer to have, anybody seen the Dove Sketches campaign with the, which was, I mean, it's like phenomenal, right? And like how much media, like how much advertising did they actually, did Unilever actually spend to put that out there? Like, actually not that much. They had a lot of consumers doing the work for them, and that's actually one of the biggest trends that we see in media, the concept of consumers driving content marketing and that viral pass along. So that's why big data is central to everything that we do, and we're really excited about it.
So I probably do two things. So one is I build a product, and we use all the things that probably most of you use in your jobs, measurement data, signals to A/B test things and figure out how to make the product better. Right? People like this view of the data better than this view of the data. I think the other thing, though, that's maybe more interesting than that is we actually take that data. So I told you we track something you want to buy in the future. You're going to buy a big TV, but you don't want to spend $1,500 on it. Right? You're willing to spend $1,300 on it. So we track that product over time. We keep that data, about 200 million products, and we give that back to the consumer. So you can look at a graph and see what is the price of that camera over time, or that television over time, or that pair of shoes over time. So what does price volatility look at since it's tracked every hour? So we use that as a deal with our consumers to hopefully attract more, but to keep them coming back. It's kind of an interesting usage of the data that we use there.
So maybe a little bit different for us is that for everything that we do, the content always comes first. It's the creative energy that fuels everything that we do. And we then look at the data after the content creation. And that's why an average content creator who joins Maker, and again, as I said earlier, there's 60,000 of them, the average creator will double the size of his or her audience within 9 months by using the data that we help them provide and help do things in a smarter and more efficient fashion. If anyone who knows the ecosystem, that's no small feat. anyone knowing what it takes to increase audience size. So a doubling of their audience size then means a doubling of revenue to them. And within 9 months, that's a pretty fantastic thing, which has really helped spur our growth.
So what are some of the most unusual ways that you've seen data used to achieve a goal?
They keep scanning my badge everywhere I go in this place, so it's probably going to be something unusual that comes out why they need to keep track of me so often. I don't know. In unusual, it's, there are different snippets that you get. We'll find some things. I'll actually take something from my past. I used to be a Tremor video. One of the unique things we found walking into an audience once was that the yogurt that the company was choosing to advertise, we had the unfortunate position of going in and showing them that the agency wanted to reach moms with their yogurt brand. And unfortunately, we had a large spike of teen boys and who were engaging and looking at this piece of creative and going through to the website. And you feel like you go in there and you say, well, this is a fail, right? Because the agency is going to look at you and say, we wanted to reach moms. You clearly didn't do that. We're pulling budget from you. Well, thank goodness somebody in the room who was in the research department was able to say, yes, that makes total sense, because we know that teen boys who are using yogurt when they are wrestlers to cut weight and to make weight, because it's high in protein and low calorie. So we were able to make that connection and help that person was able to make that connection. So using that data, but then having a human being there helping you to understand it, that's where we would have had our head handed to us if it weren't for that.
I think that's a great point, and before we jump on from that, Tremor Video takes full credit for the fact that now when you go in the yogurt aisle, there are a number of manufacturers that have black yogurt packaging. It's not that traditional white, pink, and blue, and it says in big letters, high protein instead of low fat. So it's a great example of both how demographic stereotyping doesn't work and how when you're truly following your consumers, you can drive innovative products that sell to the consumer who's actually interested in your product.
It's interesting that yogurt is now a big topic of conversation here, because the example I was going to give is also yogurt-based.
How many of you guys eat yogurt?
Well, yeah, actually, that's one of the things that's driven what we're doing. One of our clients, a big yogurt producer, obviously CPG, we've moved them from looking at models that were really based on what the interaction with ads were, so simply views, click-throughs, that type of thing, to a model that's much more integrated across all channels and looks at different signals to indicate what's working and what's not working. So we've moved from pretty basic metrics to looking at metrics that evaluate engagement with ads, which is part of it, and post-ad engagement, so engagement on websites, that type of thing. Interaction with promotions, so coupons, specific store traffic drivers, and then actual purchase data. And merging all three of these indicators, basically creating an index across all three of these different data sets, that we're able to normalize this data together and turn it into an individual metric that has multiple components that we're able to dial up or dial down different areas of what we're doing based on the success we're having in these three big areas that ultimately are giving us a signal on what the actual consumer purchase is, which is ultimately what we're doing. There's no kind of perfect solution yet for actually knowing if an ad is driving an in-store sale. So we have to put mechanisms in place that will indicate whether it is likely that that ad drove that sale. So we're tying it all the way from the original impression, tracking the exposures that we're seeing across that. That's pretty standard, and then tying it back to the actual purchase in store using panels and models and that type of thing. So it's getting much more into what consumers are actually doing and much more into the actions that the ads are driving to consumers to take part in. And a big change from where it's been, a big change from even what I think most marketers are still looking at as the key metric in online advertising, and into something that actually shows how it's changing their business, which is the most important thing. That's pretty cool.
Are you going to talk about yogurt too?
Did you hear about that guy? He's like, he made that new, that big yogurt company that came out of nowhere, and the guy's like a billionaire now, whatever, like, what's that, the new yogurt? Chobani guy, yeah, the Chobani guy is like freaking crazy. But I think one example of, surprising example of data is that we work with essentially anybody who's producing video content, any marketer. And there was a film studio, 20th Century Fox, they made this movie called Australia. And if you guys, probably nobody's seen it because it totally was a flop, but had Hugh Jackman and Nicole Kidman, and they put out a trailer. And essentially we were analyzing the trailer, we put it out there, we get all these signals back, and what they found was the trailer was totally bombing. And the movie was targeted at women ages 30 and up. But the entire trailer is featuring Nicole Kidman. And, you know, she's got like that sort of, she used to be like really pretty, but now not so pretty. And like, or, you know, like all that work and stuff. And so the trailer was performing like really badly. They're just like, why is this performing so badly? And it's like, well, it's because, you know, you take this one little snippet, 2 seconds with Hugh Jackman like wet in the rain, and like the video like spikes, like they're rewinding and watching that over and over again, but then everything else, like they're dropping off like crazy. So it's like, okay, you probably want a trailer with more Hugh Jackman, less Nicole Kidman. Like things like that I think are really interesting. And it leads to this broader point of utilizing data to actually bring science to what has traditionally been an art, the creative production. And so we have this tool called Contagion that we've developed in partnership with Viviki that allows you essentially to plan campaigns to generate earned media and viral spread. And it essentially scores your creative. It's something that like 5 years ago we would have thought would not be possible, but it essentially scores your creative before it goes live and predicts how much it will get shared and passed along. And we think that that's a really surprising application of data because it kind of would have helped that example with 20th Century Fox perform better.
And I'm probably going to be a little repetitious, but I actually think it's who's using the data that's the clever thing that's changing. So, you know, Jason, why are they scanning us? It feels somehow manipulative, right? Why does I turn off GPS on the phone because someone might be watching that? But if that flipped into you attended 3 sessions today and you had good recommendations for the rest of the week, right? I've traded you some value for bothering you at the door and scans and all of that. And so I think there's a very clever thing to do that's probably in its early stages of taking this insight not just to measure an audience and figure out segments and get young boys to buy yogurt, but to actually provide value back. We did a thing last year tracking all these products where, and honestly I used it self-servingly, but to figure out what's the best day to buy consumer electronics in the holiday shopping season. Right, so when should you buy a camera versus when should you buy a toy, and giving that back to the consumers. The Toys R Us top 10 toys, and here is, given last year, the dates, independent of retailers, to buy this category of products. Buy your electronics the Saturday before Christmas, not on Black Friday. Right, and you do that by measuring a whole bunch of signals, gathering a bunch of data together, and then giving it back to the consumers.
So earlier I mentioned that in our research at Tremor, we've seen that the marketing funnel has changed shape. So instead of being this wide shape at the top and then gradually narrowing, it's bulging in the middle as consumers are seeing all their different options. Do you guys disagree or agree with that based on what you're seeing? And given what you perceive the shape to be, what do you think is state of the art for digital and top of the funnel marketing?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you know, I think that's definitely a good way of looking at it. You know, it's not so linear. I think the answer to the funnel is it's not so linear anymore, right? It's constantly evolving. You may jump in very quickly and jump out very quickly and have actually kind of perform the action that a marketer is hoping that you will in, you know, because you have a need state and you have to buy a washing machine because yours broke. So your behavior, you know, it doesn't always happen that, oh, you know, I want to find out what these brands are, and then, oh, I'm going to consider these 3 out of 10, and then I'm going to buy the one who meets my needs and has the best price. Often it happens in a split second where you make a quick decision based on previous knowledge where you weren't even necessarily in what we typically call the funnel before. And then I think that or incorporating sort of what happens after the purchase is really critical too, in terms of what you as a consumer are saying to people you know, and what you're saying, if you're using any websites, that type of thing, to comment or rate the product. And then, there's a life cycle now that happened before, but we probably weren't able to track it as well before, and we're able to now see that consumer who bought something 3 to 5 years down the road when they're in the market for a new product, whether it's television or a car, and understanding that the time that's lapsed since they made the purchase to let's say 5 years down the road is actually a really important time for the marketer to continue to develop a relationship with that consumer, so that when they're ready for their purchase, they've got that marketer top of mind, assuming that they enjoy their experience with the product. So, there's a lot of ways to kind of look at it, I think, and it's not, and none of them are necessarily wrong. But what is wrong, I think, is looking at it as a point A to point B type of consumer journey. It's really much more involved and much broader at the same time. In terms of kind of the best practices at top of funnel, I guess there's a few ways to answer that. I think that if we're talking about things from an ad format perspective, I think there's a lot of exciting things going on in the development of different formats, whether it's better use of video, better targeting within video. There's a lot of exciting things going on there. New ad units that are not based on the standard IAB formats are coming into play a lot more now, and from my perspective are much better ways to engage with the consumer and actually have have them notice you. Things that there's sort of the native advertising trend that's going on. There's a lot of kind of in-page ad units that are not inside a box per se, but actually take place on the page, that allow you to have, if you're interested as a consumer, a much more involved experience, and can play around with products and look at different combinations of whether it's colors and styles and that type of thing, all within the within the same page. So I think that stuff is driving a lot of top of funnel advancement in the marketplace. I'm sure there's a lot of other areas that, it's a broad question, so there's a lot of areas that these other guys can answer.
So Pine Sol came to us some time ago and wanting to have this conversation and talking about how do they change the way they do things. It's very simple and easy when you're a household cleaner to buy ads adjacent to home content, right, or cooking or things like that. Well, to change the conversation, we teamed them up with one of our creators by the name of Ed Bassmaster. And I don't know if any of you are fans of Ed Bassmaster. He's got about 1 million subs on YouTube. You get talent in the room with somebody who has an objective, and they created a couple of videos, which I hope you go and look at, and go look up Ed Bassmaster or look up Ed Bassmaster and Pine Sol. And there's not a single person who doesn't watch these videos and start laughing at what goes on. They got combined, we made a couple of videos, we got over 1 million views for Pine Sol, which never in their wildest dreams would they ever think that they could put a commercial up and that anybody would choose to watch it. But you hit on a couple of touch points. It becomes very organic to the audience that they're wanting to reach. It gets uploaded as content. It doesn't feel like an ad, it doesn't look like an ad, but yet it has all the values and all of the touch points that they want to get across, how easy it is and how powerful it is and how strong it is, and oh yeah, it just happens to be a funny piece of content. So you're changing the way you do things to get to some of that mid-funnel metrics, because you're not just waiting for somebody to type in, how do I clean up a grease stain on my floor? Because then you could certainly do search, or you could have other ads in that way. Or you could just say, like I said, advertise next to cooking content. So these advertisers are now learning to change the game a little bit and doing that, brands as publishers, content creation, all those different pieces. So the smart ones are taking advantage of the new opportunity. And it wasn't the old-fashioned way, which is if you had to sit in a room, it can still be effective. I don't want to insult Adam and your entire company, because I don't do that. But it's what they do. It's you sit in a room and you say, how do we come up with ideas? What's going to resonate with our audience? How do we make a touch point here between what this brand is looking to achieve and the audience that will appreciate this? And then when you do it right, it works well.
Cool. I mean, I think one way to think about if the funnel had been more linear and now it's kind of bulbous, I think it's because consumers have more choice. They have more options. And I think this actually is a big issue because if you think about it, I mean, obviously we all want more choice for ourselves. But when you think about how the attribution takes place, like there's this concept of the last click attribution issue where essentially Google, maybe it's Amazon, they get credit for essentially all this research that you've been conducting. Like let's say you want to buy like a new hot tub. I don't know, whatever. But like you're like researching hot tubs or whatever, and I don't know where you would go for that, like hottubresearch.com or something. But you're like doing all this work. You're watching some videos on YouTube. Maybe you're talking to your buddy Adam, who's got like a cool hot tub. And then when you actually purchase it, if you do purchase and transact online, I don't know. But that last gateway to the purchase, whether it's it could be Amazon. It could be Google. These guys essentially get such a disproportionate amount of the credit that this actually presents issues for marketers, for agencies, and for vendors, marketing technology vendors, because essentially you're in here in all this activity that's happening, and you're trying to get people pushed down to transact. And even if you do successfully get people to transact, sometimes you don't get credit, and sometimes Google gets all the credit. And this is one of the challenges. I see like a Google laptop here with the +1. I'm assuming you're from Google because nobody else has a +1 on their laptop. But anyway, so and I'm not saying anything bad about Google. I love Google. I think it's like it is the most amazing money-making machine ever. It's like the perfect Ponzi scheme, except it's actually like legit. I love it. But it does create an issue for all this activity that happens via consumer choice. And I do love Google, so sorry about that. Don't kill me, Google.
On that last click attribution, Adam, I'd love to hear you address that. And how do you deal with the last click attribution in terms of making sure you're in the campaigns you're giving credit to the folks that are more top funnel and mid funnel and not just to Google?
Yeah, we don't operate on last click attribution models. I mean, it's as simple as that. And with our focus on analytics overall, every single client we've across the board, we've evolved now from looking at that to at least a basic, multi-touch, multi-view attribution model. Even if it's simply percentages that we're applying, taking last click, last view, click-throughs, that type of thing, and creating a basic algorithm around it. Or we've got more clients who are I think more focused on the DR side of things, and the attribution is critical to them to understand what's working and how to drive sales like today. So we do a lot with them to develop pretty advanced models in understanding where the credit goes, where the credit comes from, how much influence the search had in the overall sale or conversion, and trying to give the proper credit where it's due. The model of attributing everything to the last exposure, the last click is I think it's a very misleading way of looking at things and can really skew where your investments go and really lead you as a marketer down the wrong path. So, I would say we evangelize the approach where we're looking at all touch points across the board and giving, employing algorithms to understand where the power lies and where the investment should flow.
Great.
So I'll tell you about Cosmopolitan, one of our more visible customers. So you can page through the pages of Cosmopolitan, little button appears. If there's products on the page you can shop for, press the button, shop for the products. So one of the interesting things we saw, so we think we're a top of funnel solution, gathering consumers at the point in time they first discover something interesting that they want to buy. About a third of the products that were in Cosmopolitan in September weren't available at retail yet. It was stuff from Fashion Week that they wrote about. And so what we saw, so it's Gucci and Cosmopolitan. Gucci had run an ad with some good-looking guy that convinced us all that we'd be better looking if we bought Gucci stuff, I guess. But it was a brand-based ad, right? Just meant to kind of impact your impression or your consideration of that overall brand. A few pages later, 17 pages later, really cool at Fashion Week is a pair of Gucci shoes, not available at retail yet, We made that look like a product, and the only thing that you could do in the funnel with that product was look at a thumbnail of it, get a description of it, and be alerted later when it becomes available. Right? It replaced that behavior of check Zappos every morning, I have to have that pair of shoes. And because those two things are related together, right, the thing changing about data and technology is, one, you didn't have to run surveys to figure out how those things worked. Right? The math shows you that consideration of Gucci 17 pages after a Gucci brand ad is higher than it was for Armani, right? And it was all on the same model, or it actually wasn't all on the same model, but it was all mentioned in the same article. And so you start to see those things, but there are these really natural behaviors that consumers have. Imagine some of you in here check Zappos every morning because you have to have that pair of shoes. And we can now see those things, right? They're kind of becoming visible, becoming transparent.
So how does programmatic play into your plans for big data and marketing? Where do you see you using it? And in particular, I'm interested in how you're using it for effectiveness, not just for efficiency.
Well, maybe Adam could answer this better, but we essentially, the way our platform works is it's all driven by data, and our thought is that when you look at what's happening, I don't know how many of you work in advertising, like anybody, like, or marketing or things like that. So so when you think about the way that we look at programmatic as it currently stands today is that it doesn't necessarily suit our model so much. The reason is that when you think about advertising exchanges like DoubleClick AdX or something like that, and then you've got the demand side platforms that are essentially bidding engines to try to get price down for their clients. If you think about that, essentially that model serves to help a publisher get rid of unsold inventory and helps a marketer get stuff really cheap. So that is a model that is driven where stuff is driven downward. And we personally believe that what we're doing is creating a new class of advertising, and kind of similar to what Google does. And I'm really not saying anything bad about Google. So if visible measures like no longer shows up in Google search results like tomorrow, like I'll be like super bummed out, and like you're like on your laptop like, Larry, like I met this guy, he's a jerk, and like, but anyway, but if you think about what we're trying to do, like Google created a new class, or essentially popularized a new class of advertising, and they essentially try to have people compete to bid the prices up. And so if you can have something that is scarce and valuable, then the bidding should work to bid things up, not down. So the reason why we have not done programmatic is because today, at least, the way programmatic works on the buy side is that it's used to bring prices downward. And for us, we're trying to create a marketplace as opposed to an exchange, marketplace being something that is a controlled, scarce, valuable entity. So that's our position on the market.
So the way we look at programmatic is the exchange piece of the marketplace is a portion of what our programmatic offering is. It is the efficiency driver, and it's often the scale driver in programmatic, but there's also other components that are pretty critical, especially for, when you've got brands that aren't necessarily focused on a direct ROI or an online sale, that there's a branding metric in place, and all they're trying to do is get you to know about a product. A good example is LVMH, one of our clients, and 35 brands across the board in fashion, luxury, spirits. They don't want to buy exchange inventory. They don't want to run banners on some site you've never heard of, possibly in China. They want big, well-lit experiences, and they want to be on publishers that they know very well. So what we've done for them and for other clients that kind of fall into the same boat is we've pushed very hard over the past year into developing direct relationships with publishers so that we're able to tap into, the Condé Nast, Hearst, and Merediths of the world in their digital offerings across all channels, across, desktop and tablet and mobile, to access this inventory where, to Brian's point, not even on an an open auction model, but rather where we come to those companies and we agree on a price up front, and then we use the data to better target. So we use the data, we take our first party data, and then we'll enhance it with data that we're buying, and we will do a deal with Condé Nast across the board, or for a specific publication within that group. We'll have a pre-agreed upon price, and we'll use this data to find the best consumer on that on that site at any given time to target with, so that we know where the ad's going to land. It's only a question, so we know where the ad's going to land, we know how much we're going to pay. It's just a question of finding the best consumer who's there. And that's a real growing part of the overall programmatic world right now. And this also includes video, and it also includes more engaging units, rich media, and that type of thing. Where that type, I think video is getting to be pretty far advanced in the programmatic space. The rich media stuff, not so much just yet, but there's a lot of starts going on there. So I do think that it'll start to become available pretty soon. And that type of stuff is critical, not only for brands who have a name that they want to protect very closely, but also for brands who are just interested in driving awareness, launching a product, you want people to know about it. Using these kind of premium programmatic networks is a way to really safely start to get a message out and engage a consumer in a bigger way than you're going to be able to get by buying ad exchange inventory.
I don't know. I feel like sometimes on the, if you say that you're against programmatic, it's like saying you're against clean air or something. You get shunned by the tech community. Let's just say I appreciate an advertiser wanting to only pay and get the audience that they want. So you should use technology for that. I just haven't seen it in video where there's quality inventory that's being watched by a human that can be sold by another human that's not 100% sold out from the publisher side. So I caution folks to make sure that what they're actually buying, because we've seen it you could say so many times that we know there's fraud, right, in the digital landscape. There just is when it comes to advertising, and we've seen it so much in the banner landscape. I hope that it's not, where there's money, there's opportunity. And there are very clever people creating faux pages with faux humans. I probably can't say faux humans, robots, because you're either a human or you're not, right? Watching video and impressions are going by and people might be buying it because it fits a certain criteria. And that's just going to be bad for the business. So I have, from my exposure, I've been doing digital for as long as anybody, and I've been doing video specifically for the past 5 years, very deep. I just don't see very quality humans creating great content, upper echelon stuff that's not getting sold out. So be careful what you're buying in the programmatic video space.
Just quick comments since the microphone's passing me right now. I'll grab it. Jason's totally right. I mean, I don't disagree with that at all. I think that programmatic has a place. You absolutely have to be careful with it, though. It's not for every advertiser. It can make the numbers look really good. It also then goes back to what attribution model you're using and how you're evaluating that. So if you're using an attribution model that is somewhat complex and maybe more correct than something like the last view attribution model, programmatic may not look as good, which is why we've really pushed hard to develop programmatic, to buy programmatically, but with known publishers, so you're not buying off exchanges. And I think that's an important piece of it. I also say that buying off exchanges, you need to put significant brand safety measures in. You need to put not only technology measures, but human measures too. You have to have people reviewing what's going on because you can't trust the algorithms to make everything work perfectly.
Okay. Last question, and then we'll open it up to the audience. Can there be such a thing as too much data?
No.
Well, it's funny because if you have a ton of data and people don't know what to do with it, I feel like if you're a marketer, and a lot of you guys said that you're marketers, like a lot of times you don't know what to do with all this stuff, right? So to us, it's all about using data to surface insights and then be able to take action. And I think from the perspective of the marketer, you care more about the action than the data. I mean, having the data is critical. I mean, that's all we do is the data, but we sometimes have to remind ourselves, not always more is more. I mean, certainly we as a business, want to have as much data as possible, but if we can't surface valuable insights, then it's just sort of no point for us.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, I think that there probably is too much data out there. I mean, I think if the data is for a very specified purpose, like the data you got on your consumers, that's very specific data. And probably very actionable, but there's a lot of data that's not actionable, and there's a lot of data that gets collected that doesn't get used.
Yeah.
So you need to collect the data, that's the first part, but you need to have the infrastructure in place to be able to use the data. Otherwise, you're collecting data, you're paying costs for something that's not creating value.
Yeah, just from being a creative company like we are, you just want to make sure that data doesn't crush the creative spirit. Because we still think that's where humans thrive, is creating this this demand, this style, this attitude, all of these different pieces. Like, an LVMH is one of the most unique companies in the world. They're not going to just use data to drill down and find somebody. They still have artists who need to create the product and create this vision. And, data doesn't make something sexy the way humans can. So that's just a note of caution on the other side of it, even though this is a data panel. Sorry.
Let me explain my...
You only had one word.
So let me explain my contrarian opinion. You discover lots of things that you weren't intending to measure later, all over the place, in every discipline, in lots of places. So I'd go and say, look, data doesn't crush the creative spirit. Data that you can't use right now, you know what, we're eating too many bits or paying too much cost and all of that. Don't worry about it. Gather, gather, gather. Gather for a reason, right? And have a reasonable intention of what you're trying to do. But going back and discovering patterns from the past, going back and discovering or proving or disproving a theory is hugely, hugely valuable. And when you want to start to prove a theory, and then we'll start gathering the data to prove that tomorrow, that you're crushing your innovation cycles. Going back and looking at, you know what, we've been measuring whatever for a long time. Let's go look at, and automation, computer science, all of this stuff has all been about going back and analyzing past patterns and finding things. So I'd encourage the opposite. Gather it and try and be intelligent about, having some purpose for gathering it, but keep it. Delete nothing. Keep it all.
Well, I think that's an interesting point for the panelists to end on, the power of using data for serendipitous discovery, like the yogurt example. Thank you. So we're out of time. Thank you guys so much for coming, and thank you to all of our panelists.